I want to tell you a story. It's about a pattern that keeps repeating throughout history. It's a story about a series of strange coincidences that, once you look closer, don't feel like coincidences at all. Children who can read minds, animals that seem to know our thoughts, generals who remember lives that they've never lived. At first, these stories seem isolated, but when you look at them together, a pattern starts to emerge. Our story starts with a recent podcast called The Telepathy Tapes. It went viral for documenting a series of shocking controlled experiments involving autistic children who can allegedly read minds. These aren't just theories, these are recorded events observed by both scientists and skeptics. What's strange about the show, it doesn't just talk about telepathy, it actually shows it.
My son said to me, "I can hear thoughts." And I said, "Impossible." And he said to me, "You don't get the kind of gifts that I have if you lie."
Let's please multiply two numbers and see if he gets it.
Okay, what is it?
9, 0, 0.
Unbelievable.
1.
Maybe shuffle again, Dr. Powell.
Plus 2.
So he got the plus too.
I was wondering, because I was looking at the 2 the whole
Yeah.
time and I saw his hand going somewhere else.
What is this phenomena happening? Why are his mind and my mind completely connected?
At the center of it all is Dr. Diane Powell, a Johns Hopkins trained neuropsychiatrist who's been studying nonverbal autistic children. By all accounts, these children shouldn't be able to communicate at all, but somehow they are.
I knew that a lot of people would think, boy, Diane's gone off the deep end. But
That's the risk any scientist takes when they challenge the current paradigm.
Joining us today to shed some light, Dr. Diane Powell.
I'm working with children who have been reported by a parent to be able to read their mind.
The data was so compelling and accurate that I had to follow it, even though I knew I was risking my scientific reputation.
And these kids don't just guess what their parents are thinking. The researchers use blindfolds and shuffled cards and random number generators, and these kids can correctly guess what their parents are seeing every single time. And it gets even stranger than that. These kids claim that they meet in a sort of shared mental space that they call the Hill. On the Hill, they can exchange information and develop friendships, and they even develop intimate relationships with others across the world. These kids are verifiably communicating with other nonverbal autistic children across the globe that they have never met. Many of these kids even say that they speak to angels and they can see the dead. And what's more, they're often drawn to God because of these abilities. Throughout the podcast, Dr. Powell brings in camera crews and sound engineers and outside observers, and they all try to find the trick, but nobody can. Most leave convinced that these children are actually telepathic.
I started testing them and I found that they were exceedingly accurate.
What is the next number?
3.
Dr. Tarrant, he's done these QEEG scans to see what's going on.
The biggest overall finding is really this increase of activation across all the brain waves. If there was no change, I would definitely be skeptical.
If you can show a consistent pattern, particularly from kid to kid, that's how science changes. You cannot fake this.
We want answers like, where does it come from? I want to know how and what are we supposed to do?
We can't all be crazy.
We are far more powerful than we can imagine, and the implications are huge for humanity and the planet.
The changes in the brain are measurable, and the patterns are consistent, and the implications are far bigger than anyone expected. But what's strange is this isn't mind reading in the conventional sense. There's no passing of information. It's more like a raw transmission. They receive the exact same information as their parents at exactly the same time. This isn't some hack due to closeness. Their brains seem to work differently. And these experiments are a clue about how our ideas are actually generated, or maybe how our consciousness actually works. And it's important to remember that we have never truly understood how the brain works. We think of the brain as a database now, but that's only because we live during the computer age. We've always modeled our brain after our best technology. First it was a steam engine, and then it was a telegraph, then it was a computer, and now it's a neural network. But what if it's none of these things? What if the brain doesn't store thoughts at all? What if our thoughts are generated somewhere else and your brain just receives them? You are not the signal, you're the antenna. And just like the radio, some brains have better reception than others. They have a wider bandwidth, they have clear tuning to the source. Most of the time, we're locked into our own personal channel. You generate a sense of self through this sort of private feed, but what if that signal leaks? You hear something that wasn't meant for you. You see an image that you've never seen. You know something that you've never learned. We seem primed for personal signals, individual consciousness, private thought. But animals are different. They act like they're tuned into something shared. Take a look at this video of a study showing ants solving a problem. It looks pretty normal until you compare it to a video of humans doing the exact same task. In this study, when humans were unable to speak, ants beat them. It appears that ants individually are not as smart as us, but in a colony, they outperform us when doing complex tasks. This is because ants don't solve problems alone. They solve them as one. Scientists call it a swarm intelligence or a hive mind. But a hive mind is more than just cooperation, it's convergence. Each ant acts like it already knows what the other ants are doing. It's like they're all accessing the same brain at the same time. And strangely, the more ants that you add, the better it works. But with humans, the more people you add, the less efficient we are. Humans are most efficient when we are working alone or in very small groups. And according to scientists, they explain the hive mind by pheromones and micro movements. But what if the hive mind is more than that? Take a look at these starlings in a murmuration. Thousands of birds moving as one organism. This should be impossible. They have no leader, but they don't collide. They move as one organism in harmony. Scientists say that they do this through pure math. Each bird tracks 7 neighbors, and then those reactions sort of cascade through the rest of the flock. But this explanation feels thin to me. Blue angels are famous for flying in patterns together as close as 18 inches. But this takes years of training, and accidents still happen. And blue angels fly in formations of 6, not thousands. I would argue that something else is happening when birds create murmurations. It's something closer to shared intuition. But this type of shared knowing isn't just poetic, it's observed in the lab too. There have been studies that record this type of communal intelligence, but the results are so strange, they've largely been ignored. Take a look at this clip of researcher Rupert Sheldrake talking about this phenomenon.
It's the idea of memory in nature, the idea that the whole universe has a kind of memory. What it means in effect is that if you train rats to learn a new trick in Los Angeles, then rats in New York and Sydney and London will learn the same thing quicker straight away. So he trained these rats to escape from a water maze. They had to swim. If they went out the wrong exit, they got an electric shock. If they went out the right exit, they just escaped from the maze. And he tested them to see how many trials they made before they learned always go out of the dim exit. And the first generation took about 250 trials before they cottoned on to what was happening. The next generation, it was about 180 trials. The next generation, about 150. They got better and better. And he thought at first this was because there was something being passed on to the children, maybe through modifying the genes or something like that. So people tried repeating his work in the University of Edinburgh, Scotland, and Melbourne, Australia. And they found that their rats started more or less where the Harvard rats had left off.
Wow.
And in Melbourne, they did an experiment that was particularly interesting. They found that all rats of that breed, even if their parents had never been trained, were getting better too. So whatever it wasn't something to do with modifying the genes, or what people would now call epigenetics. There was something else, much more mysterious, going on. And since no one knew what it was just ignored and forgotten.
Sheldrake didn't stop there. He expanded on this idea with an experiment that he did with a dog named JT. He believed that dogs actually know when their owners are coming home, regardless of their schedule.
Are dogs picking it up just by routine or car sounds? The answer is no. We film them, we have people come at random times in unfamiliar vehicles. The dogs still know. We did a series of 100 trials with one dog, and on 80 of those occasions the dog started waiting before she got in the car to come home or the taxi. It picked up her intention, and this was at random times. On 20 occasions out of 100 it didn't. On 3 or 4 of those the dog was sick. And on the other occasions, it was when there was a bitch on heat in the next apartment. But even if you include all 100 events, including the ones where the dog was and do the statistics, it's still massively significant.
Sheldrake then went on to test if people can tell when they're being stared at. You would expect a 50% accuracy, but across his experiments, people guessed right over 65% of the time. This is statistically impossible if you were just randomly guessing. And due to the sheer number of trials that Sheldrake performed, the probability of this occurring is in the neighborhood of billions to 1. Something is happening here. Our thoughts are leaking, or maybe connecting, across minds, across species. But what if our thoughts can actually leak across time? Some people don't just hear someone else's thoughts. They remember somebody else's life.
And now, one of the biggest questions of life. What happens when it's over? Heaven? Hell? Nothing? Or might there be a fourth possibility, reincarnation? Could we come back as someone else? Here's Chris Cuomo with 2 down-to-earth parents who thought they understood the mysteries of life. That is, until their toddler began to talk.
James knows a lot about planes, especially war planes. But then, when he was 2, the planes James loved suddenly began to give him frequent and frightening nightmares. So what explains the nightmares and James's strange obsession with airplanes?
A lot of times my mom had said maybe he's remembering a past life.
His parents say between the ages of 2 and 4, James would reveal extraordinary details about the life of a former fighter pilot, mostly at bedtime, when he was drowsy.
Bruce said, what happened to your plane? He said, it crashed on fire. And Bruce said, why did your airplane crash? And he said, it got shot. And Bruce said, well, who shot your plane? And I'll never forget the look on his face. He went, the Japanese.
Still, despite these extraordinary stories, Bruce remained dubious. Almost to prove they couldn't be true, he began to piece together the details James was sharing. And what he found, he says, shook him to the core. For in many instances, the stories appeared to match the facts. James seemed to be recalling real events, real people, in the life of a man who had been dead for almost 60 years.
By the time it was all said and done, James's parents confirmed over 50 specific details from his memories. All of these facts matched the real life of a pilot named Jack Larson, who died in a plane crash during World War II. Then there's the strange story of General Patton. He didn't just believe in past lives, he remembered them.
The Carthaginians defending the city were attacked by 3 Roman legions. Carthaginians were proud and brave, but they couldn't hold. They were massacred. Arab women stripped them of their tunics and their swords and lances. These soldiers lay naked in the sun. 2,000 years ago. I was here. You don't believe me, do you, Brad?
Patton claimed to have lived several lives, all warriors. Everyone from a Roman soldier to a medieval knight. He even claimed that he was General Hannibal of Carthage. He toured battlefields and spoke as if he had fought there. He described troop movements from centuries earlier, which were strangely later verified in military texts. My opinion on reincarnation is it's not about returning, it's about retuning. People are listening into signals meant for someone else. In the case of James, it was someone who lived before. And in General Patton's case, maybe he knew war to such an intimate degree that he could pick up the signals of warriors that came before him. So if some people seem to have the ability to pick up signals not meant for them, then maybe it's not new. Maybe we used to be able to access it, and there are ways that we can still access it. Across centuries and continents, humans have reached for substances to help them access the divine, things that help them cross into the unseen realm. And this isn't just a stoner vibe, it's clinical. Psychedelics like psilocybin and DMT actually reduce brain filtration. This is why users report feeling like they're tapping into something larger. Psychologist David Luke found in a meta-review of studies that up to 83% of users reported some sort of paranormal-like event while on psychedelics, telepathy being the most common. Under psychedelics, some say this connection returns, not symbolically, literally, and I spoke to someone who experienced it firsthand.
So my name is Leah Prime.
Leah Prime is a lay consciousness researcher who participates in personal telepathy experiments, often while under the influence of ketamine. And what she's found, in my opinion, lines up with everything that we've been building towards. Not only do these altered states seem to broaden the signal, they allow for direct, repeatable information transfer.
I read a book about J.B. Rhine, and he primarily studied telepathy or precognition. He's the person who made Zener cards famous. So Zener cards are like these playing cards, and they have 5 symbols on them. It's like a star, a circle, lines. What was interesting is he was finding in his research that he could not consistently replicate statistically significant results within a laboratory setting. You couldn't put people in these like controlled environments and have them repeatedly demonstrate that they could appropriately pick a Zener card. But he was finding that outside of this really controlled laboratory setting, occasionally people would show up and they would be able to hit 20 or 30 Zener cards in a row. And the statistical likelihood of that actually happening is like in the trillions or septillions, right? So this is like beyond reasonable doubt that there is something going on here that is contrary to what we understand about consciousness and information retrieval. I became very focused and practiced doing lay experiments under the influence of ketamine, which puts you in this kind of exploded or expanded state of consciousness. I'm not sending or receiving War and Peace from my partner, but have had a lot of success with things like sending animals or colors, with kind of a shocking degree of accuracy.
This is repeatable, documented data. Children syncing with parents, birds moving as one, memories that don't belong to you but come through anyway. The signal is widened and something arrives. But here's the danger. If the brain is a receiver, then psychedelics aren't just visions. They're exposure to the other side.
These can be incredibly destabilizing experiences. And I think ultimately these experiences, if I could distill it down to how do you have them in a way that's not scary, is basically being very well practiced in the art of letting go. Understanding the monumental power of these experiences, not only for what they say about consciousness and science and reality and mass, like at a grand scale, but also for what it tells us about our individual human experience, right? This is why the concept of ego death can be so destabilizing because our identities are so yoked to who we are. And if you take those things away, what is left?
So, what are we left with? Where does that leave us? Because across people and animals and memories and minds, there's a pattern, there's a signal. And the more you look, the harder it is to ignore. So telepathy might be real, but not because our minds are linking, but because our consciousness may be originating from somewhere else. What we call reincarnation might not be about a soul returning from the dead, but a frequency repeating. It's a lingering field waiting for somebody to listen. I think that's what we're doing with our experiments and our drugs. We're spinning the dial and we're expanding the bandwidth. We're letting in more than we are allotted. And there's a danger in that, I think. I don't think we were meant for that. We are meant to receive what's given when it's given. Because when you push the signal too far, we send it back into the realm where it emanated. We are entering into an agreement that we don't fully understand because we weren't meant to understand. The deeper danger isn't what you'll find. It's what you'll forget. It's your limits. It's your story. Ultimately, it's your flesh, because when you chase that signal past what's been given, you risk tuning out the very thing that makes you human. If you are new here, my name is Taylor McMahon. I hope that you enjoyed this video. I know it was a spicy one and it's going to step on a lot of toes, but it's something I've been thinking about for a while, and I hope that you guys get a lot of enjoyment out of it, even if you disagree with it. If you like this, I would encourage you to subscribe and hit the notification bell. If you don't hit the notification bell, you won't be notified of everything that I put up here on YouTube. If you want the fact checks for this episode, you can go and check out my newsletter, which is linked in the show notes. And I will see you guys in the next one.